Life in Austin had always felt like a warm, familiar hug. I'm Sarah Jenkins, and at 28, I thought I had it all figured out. My little bungalow tucked away in South Austin was my sanctuary. It had a porch swing that creaked just right and a yard big enough for my scruffy rescue dog Bandit to chase squirrels to his heart's content. I loved my job as a graphic designer for a local tech startup, sketching out logos and designing slick websites. The work was engaging, the people were cool, and the coffee shops were abundant. My days were a comfortable rhythm of early morning runs along Lady Bird Lake, hours spent immersed in creative projects, and evenings filled with easy laughter and shared meals with my wife. We had been married for 3 years, a whirlwind of joy and commitment that felt both solid and exciting. We had built a life together that I was fiercely proud of, a partnership based on trust, mutual respect, and a deep affection that I believed was unbreakable. She was my rock, my confidant, my best friend, or so I thought. The first ripple in our calm waters appeared subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a stone dropped into a still pond. She mentioned that a childhood friend, a guy named Mark, was passing through Austin. He was a traveler, she said, just dropping by for a few days. My initial thought was, that's nice. I'd never met Mark, only seen a blurry photo on her old social media. She went to meet him, and I didn't think twice about it. I told her to have a safe trip, to enjoy catching up. I trusted her implicitly. Why wouldn't I? But then the visits started piling up. One meeting turned into 2, then 3. Within 2 months, she had met him more than 6 times. Each time, a new reason. He was extending his stay, he had a new project, he was just passing through again. It started to nag at me. Austin wasn't exactly a tiny hamlet where people just stumbled upon each other so frequently. I tried to brush it off, to ignore the tiny voice of suspicion that was starting to whisper in the back of my mind. It felt wrong to doubt her, to question her friendships. One evening, after she told me she was meeting him again, I asked, almost casually, "So what exactly does Mark do for a living? He seems to be everywhere." Her answer was vague, something about him being a traveler, and that's when a small alarm bell went off. A traveler? That could mean anything, and the way she said it, a little too quickly, a little too dismissively, it just hit me. This was the first real sign that something wasn't right. The next time she planned to meet him, I offered to drop her off. "I'm heading that way anyway," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. She hesitated, then insisted on taking a rideshare. Her refusal was like another small, sharp prick. My gut clenched. Nevertheless, I pressed on. "Nonsense," I insisted with a cheerful smile I didn't feel. "It's no trouble at all." After a brief, awkward back and forth, she relented. Driving her to the coffee shop, my heart was a tangled knot of apprehension. I still hadn't met Mark in person, only seen that old photo. When we pulled up, he was already there, leaning against a lamppost, scrolling on his phone. As she got out, I made sure to step out with her, forcing an introduction. He was taller than I expected, with an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When I shook his hand, a cold dread settled deep in my stomach. It wasn't a feeling I could explain, just a primal instinct screaming at me. A hunch, a really bad feeling. It was enough. I drove away from the coffee shop, but I didn't go home. Every fiber of my being told me to turn around, and against my better judgment, against everything I believed about myself and about trust, I did. I found a parking spot a block away and watched. I'm not proud of it, not at all, but at that moment, curiosity, or perhaps a desperate need for confirmation, outweighed my pride. And then I saw it. Through the window of the coffee shop across the street, a moment frozen in time that would forever shatter my world. Them. Kissing, not a friendly peck, but a deep, lingering kiss that left no room for doubt. My breath hitched and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. It wasn't the furious anger I expected, not the burning rage. Instead, a profound sadness washed over me, a chilling sense of betrayal that went deeper than I knew possible. If she wanted to be with someone else, why not just end things with me first? Why the elaborate charade? I drove home on autopilot, the image of them seared into my mind. The sadness was overwhelming, a heavy blanket that smothered everything else. As I walked into our quiet house, the silence screamed at me. My eyes scanned our living room, the framed photos of our wedding, the little trinkets we collected on trips, the couch where we'd spent countless evenings, wrapped in each other's arms. It all felt like a colossal lie. Every smile she'd given me, every time she'd called my name, every kiss she'd pressed to my lips over the last 2 months, it was all tainted, rendered meaningless by that single stolen kiss. It was a performance, and I had been the oblivious audience. Hours later, when she finally came home, I was waiting. The air in the house was thick with unspoken words, a tension that crackled between us. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw a stranger. I could see the faint flush on her cheeks, the slight nervousness in her eyes, and a wave of calm, chilling resolve settled over me. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice level, almost detached. She started to explain, a practiced tale about a long conversation, a late coffee. I listened, my face a blank mask, then I laid it out simply, directly. "I saw you with Mark, kissing." Her face went pale. First, she denied it, a flurry of hurried words, accusations that I was imagining things, that I was crazy. But I held her gaze, my eyes unwavering, revealing nothing. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 minutes of strained argument and desperate lies, she broke. Her shoulders slumped and the truth, raw and ugly, tumbled out. She accepted it. I didn't show any sadness. I didn't show any anger. Inside, I was a battlefield of broken trust and shattered dreams, but I refused to let it show. I had always believed that when a cheater sees your reaction, your tears, your fury, your pain, that's when they truly feel satisfied, a twisted validation of their actions. I would not give her that satisfaction, not now, not ever. The silence that followed her confession was deafening. I walked past her, picked up a small overnight bag, and started packing. "I'm moving out," I said, my voice still unnervingly calm. "Just for a week, I need space." She started to protest, to plead, but I just shook my head. This is not up for discussion right now. I needed to think, to plan. I needed to escape the suffocating presence of her betrayal and figure out what my next move would be. The idea of forgiveness, true forgiveness, felt impossible. But the idea of letting her off the hook, of letting her walk away unscathed, felt even more so. A cold, hard plan was already beginning to form in the shattered pieces of my heart. I'm Sarah Jenkins, and I'm 28 years old, living right here in the heart of Austin, Texas. My life for the past 3 years had been a tapestry woven with the threads of domestic bliss. My wife and I had built a comfortable, loving home, filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee in the mornings, the soft hum of shared laughter in the evenings, and the quiet comfort of simply existing together. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our favorite spots around town, from the bustling farmers' markets to the quiet trails by Lady Bird Lake. Everything felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. I loved her deeply, trusted her implicitly, and honestly couldn't imagine a single day without her by my side. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, a tiny thread started to unravel. It began with a casual announcement, delivered over breakfast one crisp spring morning. "My childhood friend is in town," she'd said, her eyes bright with a nostalgia I couldn't quite place. "I'm going to meet up with him." Of course I said yes. Why wouldn't I? She had friends, I had friends, it was perfectly normal. "Have a safe trip," I'd told her, kissing her goodbye, completely oblivious to the small crack that had just appeared in the foundation of my world. One meeting turned into 2, then 3, then 6. In the span of just 2 months, her childhood friend seemed to be making himself quite comfortable in our city, or at least in her schedule. Each time she'd offer a vague explanation, a hurried departure, a slight evasiveness in her eyes that I, in my naive state of trust, initially dismissed as mere excitement. But after the 5th time, a tiny prickle of unease started to bloom in my chest. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was more a nagging question, a whisper of curiosity that grew louder with each successive outing. "What does he do, this friend of yours?" I asked one evening, trying to sound casual as I chopped vegetables for dinner. My knife clunked against the cutting board a little too loud in the sudden silence. She paused, her back to me as she rummaged through the pantry. "Oh, he's a traveler," she replied, her voice a little too breezy. And that was it, that was the first sign, a traveler. It just hit me, a dull thud in my gut. What kind of traveler spends 2 months in one city, meeting the same person 6 times? It didn't make sense. The pieces didn't fit, and for the first time I felt a genuine tremor of suspicion. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was being paranoid, maybe I was overthinking. Our marriage was strong, wasn't it? But the feeling persisted, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. Next time she announced another rendezvous, I decided to push just a little. "I'll drop you off," I offered, trying to keep my voice even, hoping she'd welcome the gesture. My heart hammered against my ribs, waiting for her answer. "Oh no, you don't have to," she insisted, a little too quickly. "I can go alone." Her refusal was sharp, immediate. It solidified the unease into a hard, cold lump. It wasn't a casual dismissal, it was an active resistance. Why, what was she hiding? My mind raced. I hadn't met this friend, only seen a blurry photo on her phone once. What if? No, I wouldn't even let myself think it. But the thought, once birthed, was hard to stifle. Despite her protests, I went with her. I remember the drive, the silence in the car, heavy with unspoken questions. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. When we pulled up to the coffee shop, he was already there waiting. He looked exactly as I'd imagined from the fuzzy picture, yet somehow different. Taller perhaps, he smiled, a wide, easy grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. As I got out of the car, feeling a strange mix of dread and defiance, I offered him my hand. He took it, his grip firm, and in that brief touch, that fleeting connection, I felt it, a really bad feeling. A hunch, a deep, unsettling certainty that something was profoundly wrong. It was visceral, a warning signal screaming in my brain. I wished I could say I drove straight home. I wished I could say I trusted her implicitly, that my suspicions vanished with that handshake. But the truth is, I'm not proud of what I did next. Driven by that potent cocktail of dread and certainty, I decided to follow them. I kept a safe distance, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I watched as they emerged from the coffee shop, laughing, their shoulders brushing. I followed their car as they drove through the familiar streets of Austin, past the vibrant murals and the quaint cafes, until they pulled into a secluded parking lot near Zilker Park. My breath caught in my throat. I parked a few cars back, my engine still running, the air conditioning blasting cold air against my face, but I felt like I was burning up. I watched, my eyes wide, unblinking, as they walked towards a cluster of trees, seeking out a quiet spot away from the few dog walkers and joggers. They stopped talking, their bodies close, and then it happened. Slow, deliberate, undeniable. He leaned in and she met him halfway. Their lips met. It was a kiss. A long, intimate kiss that tore through me like a physical blow. I didn't need to see anything else. The world tilted on its axis and I felt a profound sense of emptiness, a hollow ache where my heart had been moments before. I just left. I reversed out of the parking lot, my hands trembling on the wheel, and drove. I drove aimlessly, the vibrant colors of Austin blurring into a watercolor of pain. I wasn't angry, not immediately. I was just profoundly, devastatingly sad. More than anything, I felt a sense of betrayal so deep it stole my breath. If she wanted to cheat, if our love meant so little, why couldn't she have just broken up with me? Why the lies, the deception, the slow, agonizing drip of betrayal? As I drove, the memories of the past 2 months assaulted me. Every smile she'd given me, every time she'd called my name, every kiss she'd pressed to my lips. It all felt like a huge, elaborate lie. The warmth of her hand in mine, the tender glances, the promises whispered in the dark, all of it tainted, corrupted. My mind replayed scenes, searching for clues I'd missed, for signs that had been there all along. It was like watching a movie of my own life, but seeing it through a new, horrific lens. Everything, every single moment felt utterly false. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the initial wave of grief had been replaced by something colder, sharper. A quiet resolve settled over me. I walked into the house, the familiar silence screaming with the weight of my discovery. I knew she would come home soon, full of excuses, maybe even feigned innocence. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I wouldn't give her my tears, my anger, my heartbreak. The Reddit post I once stumbled upon about how cheaters often feel truly satisfied when they witness the victim's raw pain echoed in my mind. I wouldn't give her that, not a single ounce of it. My face was a mask, my heart a stone. I would confront her, yes, but I would do it on my terms, with a calmness that would surely unnerve her more than any outburst. The game had just begun, and I was ready to play. I'm Sarah Jenkins, and for most of my 28 years, life in Austin, Texas had been a pretty sweet deal. Sun-drenched mornings, the smell of breakfast tacos from the corner place, and the hum of a city that somehow managed to feel both sprawling and intimately familiar. I'd always loved it here, the way the music poured out of every bar on 6th Street, the quirky art scene, the endless possibilities that felt like they were woven into the very fabric of the place. I was a graphic designer, specializing in creating vibrant, eye-catching logos for small businesses. It was a job I genuinely enjoyed, a creative outlet that also paid the bills, allowing me to live comfortably in a cozy bungalow in South Austin with a small manicured yard and a porch swing that was perfect for sipping iced tea on a warm evening. My life, to put it simply, felt full. The biggest, brightest star in my personal constellation was, without a doubt, my wife. We'd been together for 5 years, married for 3, and she was my everything. She had this infectious laugh that could brighten even the cloudiest day, and a way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the only person in the world who truly understood her. We had our routines: lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles, adventurous hikes through the Barton Creek Greenbelt, and Friday night dates at our favorite Tex-Mex place. We talked about everything from the mundane details of our day to our wildest dreams for the future. We had plans, big ones like renovating the kitchen, saving for a trip to Italy, and maybe, just maybe, starting a family a few years down the line. Our life was a tapestry woven with shared laughter, inside jokes, and a deep, unshakable trust, or so I thought. The first thread in that tapestry to fray, the tiny tear that would eventually unravel everything, appeared subtly, almost innocuously, in the spring of 2023. It started with a phone call, one I barely registered at the time. My wife was on the phone, her voice a little too bright, a little too chipper. She hung up and turned to me, a wide smile on her face. "Guess who's in town?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "My childhood friend Alex. He's just passing through Austin for a few days and he wants to meet up." I smiled back, genuinely happy for her. "That's great, honey, give him my best." I'd heard about Alex before, snippets of stories from their school days, tales of mischievous adventures and long summer evenings spent under the Texas sky. I knew he traveled a lot for work, something vague about consulting or freelancing, but I hadn't given it much thought beyond that. She went to meet him, and I didn't think anything of it. It was just a friend, right? But then those few days stretched into weeks, and then 2 months. Alex, the fleeting visitor, seemed to be making himself quite at home in Austin. My wife was meeting him constantly. "He's staying longer than he expected," she'd say, "or we just have so much to catch up on." At first, I was understanding. Childhood friends are special, and I didn't want to be the kind of spouse who policed her relationships. But as the 6th meeting approached in just 2 months, a tiny, almost imperceptible knot of unease began to form in my stomach. "What exactly does Alex do?" I asked one evening, trying to sound casual as I stirred my pasta. My wife paused, a forkful of spaghetti halfway to her mouth. "Oh, you know," she said, shrugging slightly. "He's a traveler, always on the move." The casualness of her tone didn't quite match the sudden tension in her shoulders. A traveler, that was it. No specific job, no company, just a traveler. It was the first real sign, the first subtle tremor that shook the ground beneath my feet. It wasn't a red flag, not yet, but it was certainly an orange one, flapping gently in the breeze. The next time she mentioned meeting Alex, a Friday night, I offered, "I'll drop you off." I don't know why I said it, a sudden impulse, a quiet flicker of suspicion I hadn't fully acknowledged. Maybe it was the traveler comment or the sheer frequency of their meetings, but my wife immediately stiffened. No, that's okay," she said too quickly. "I can just take a rideshare, don't bother." Her insistence, the almost desperate tone in her voice, only amplified the quiet alarm bells ringing in my head. "It's no bother at all," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm heading that way anyway." I pushed gently, persistently, until she reluctantly agreed. The drive to the trendy coffee shop they were meeting at was filled with a strange, heavy silence. I tried to make small talk, but her responses were clipped, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. I could feel her tension radiating off her, a palpable hum in the small space of the car. My own heart was starting to thump a little harder against my ribs. When we pulled up to the curb, I saw him immediately. Alex. He was taller than I expected, with an easy smile and a shock of sandy blonde hair. He spotted us and waved, a friendly, open gesture. My wife practically leaped out of the car. I got out too, feeling a strange compulsion to meet him, to put a face to the name that had been echoing in our lives for the past 2 months. Alex, this is my wife Sarah, she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too strained. He extended a hand and I took it. His grip was firm, his eyes a little too direct. And that's when it hit me, a jolt, a cold dread that spread through my veins. It wasn't anything he said or even how he looked, but a gut feeling, a primal instinct that screamed wrong. It was a hunch, a horrible, undeniable premonition that burrowed deep into my core. My smile felt frozen on my face, a mask I desperately hoped he couldn't see through. I mumbled something about having to run, making an excuse about a tight deadline, and got back into my car. But I didn't drive away. I couldn't. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as I watched them disappear inside the coffee shop. The bad feeling intensified, a physical weight in my chest. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that something was terribly wrong. I pulled back a little, parking a few blocks away, hidden from view, and waited. I'm not proud of what I did next, not at all. It felt like something out of a bad movie, something desperate and cliché, but I couldn't help myself. The knot of unease had tightened into a vice, and the hunch was now a roaring alarm. I saw them emerge from the coffee shop an hour later, laughing. They walked arm in arm, casually at first, then more intimately, their shoulders brushing, their heads closed together. They stopped by a small, unassuming park bench tucked away beneath a sprawling oak tree, and then I saw it. The kiss. Not a quick, friendly peck on the cheek, but a slow, lingering embrace, a kiss that spoke of intimacy and passion. My breath hitched in my throat, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The vibrant colors of Austin seemed to drain away, leaving everything in stark black and white. My heart shattered into a million pieces, each fragment a shard of pain. I don't know how long I sat there, numb, paralyzed by the sight. It felt like an eternity and a blink all at once. The pain was immense, a physical ache that burrowed deep into my chest. But what surprised me, what truly shocked me, was that it wasn't anger that surged through me first. It was a profound sadness, a deep, aching sorrow. If she wanted to cheat, if she wanted to be with Alex, why hadn't she just broken up with me? Why the deception? Why the elaborate charade? Every memory, every smile, every kiss from the past 2 months suddenly felt like a lie. Her I love yous echoed in my head, hollow and meaningless. The shared laughter, the whispered secrets, the intimate moments, all of it was tainted, poisoned by this betrayal. It was a cold, hard truth, laid bare in front of me, undeniable and devastating. The tapestry of our life, the one I thought was so strong and beautiful, had unraveled completely, leaving behind only a tangled mess of broken threads. I started the car, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grip the wheel, and drove home. The city that had once felt so comforting now felt alien, its familiar sights mocking my pain. I was heading back to an empty house, a house that was no longer a home, and a future that had just been stolen from me. It feels like a lifetime ago, though it was only 5 years. 5 years since the unraveling began, since the perfect little world I'd painstakingly built, brick by emotional brick, crumbled into dust. My name is Sarah Jenkins, and I'm 28 now, living in Austin, Texas. But back then I was 26, happily married for 3 years to a woman I thought was my soulmate. We had a cozy little house in South Austin, the kind with a big backyard perfect for our 2 rescue dogs, Daisy and Duke. My job in graphic design was steady, hers in marketing was thriving, and our evenings were filled with shared meals, Netflix binges, and quiet conversations about our future. We talked about adopting kids, about weekend trips to the hill country, about growing old together, rocking on a porch somewhere. It was a simple, beautiful dream, and I believed in it with every fiber of my being. I remember the day it started, clear as a sunny Texas morning. It was a Tuesday, I think. She came home from work, kissed me on the cheek, and then almost casually mentioned that an old childhood friend, Mark, was coming to town. He was just passing through, she said, and they were going to grab coffee. My initial reaction was nothing but warmth. I'd always encouraged her friendships, and it sounded innocent enough. "Oh, that's nice, honey," I remember saying, genuinely happy for her. "Have a good time. Tell him I said hello." She smiled, that easy, familiar smile that always made my heart flutter a little. I had no reason, no hint, no dark premonition that this innocuous meeting would be the first tremor before an earthquake. The coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into dinner. Dinner turned into drinks. Over the next 2 months, Mark seemed to be a permanent fixture in her schedule. It wasn't just one meeting, it was 6 times in 8 weeks. Each time a new excuse, a new reason why they had to meet again. He was a traveler, she'd explained when I finally gently asked what he did, a vague term that instantly pricked at my subconscious. A traveler, what did that even mean? It was the first sign, a tiny, almost imperceptible whisper of doubt in the back of my mind. It was irrational, I told myself. She had a right to her friends, but the frequency, the vagueness, it just felt off, like a puzzle piece that almost fit but left a tiny, jagged edge. I tried to dismiss it, to bury that uneasy feeling under layers of trust and logic. We were married, we loved each other, but the whispers grew louder. She started taking calls in the other room, her phone always face down. She was a little more distant, a little more preoccupied. I'd catch her staring into space, a faint secret smile on her lips. Little things, insignificant on their own, but together they started to form a pattern I couldn't ignore. My heart, once so full of comfortable certainty, began to thrum with a quiet anxiety. One Saturday morning, as she was getting ready to meet Mark yet again, I decided to push. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light, casual, like I was just making conversation. "I can drop you off if you want, it's on my way." A simple offer, a small test. Her reaction was immediate and telling. She tensed just a fraction, a micro-expression that spoke volumes. "Oh no, it's fine," she said too quickly. "I can just get an Uber, don't want to bother you." She insisted on going alone, a firm politeness that felt like a wall. That was it. That was the moment the whisper became a shout. I knew with a cold certainty that settled deep in my bones that something was terribly wrong. I didn't argue, I just nodded, a polite smile fixed on my face. But inside, a different plan was forming. I let her leave, watched her get into her Uber, and then with a heavy heart and a knot in my stomach, I followed. I'm not proud of that. It felt low, spying on the person I loved, the person I'd vowed to spend my life with. But the alternative, the gnawing uncertainty, was worse. I kept a safe distance, my old beat-up sedan blending into the Austin traffic. She led me to a coffee shop downtown, one of those trendy places with outdoor seating. I parked down the street, keeping an eye on the entrance. My hands were clammy on the steering wheel, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Then I saw him, Mark. I'd only ever seen a blurry photo on her phone. But there he was, leaning against the brick wall outside the coffee shop, a little too handsome, a little too confident. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder, living up to the traveler moniker. My wife walked up to him and they greeted each other. Nothing overtly intimate, just a friendly hug. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that this was all in my head. But then they walked off down a quieter side street, laughing, their shoulders brushing. And that's when I saw it, the kiss. It wasn't a quick peck, a friendly greeting. It was lingering, intimate, a deep, undeniable betrayal played out right before my eyes on a sunny Saturday afternoon. My world, the one with the big backyard and the shared dreams, shattered into a million pieces. I didn't stay, I didn't confront them there, screaming in the street. I couldn't. A strange, almost out-of-body calm settled over me. I just watched for a moment as they pulled apart, still smiling at each other, oblivious to the fact that their secret had just been laid bare. Then I put my car in reverse, turned around, and drove home. The drive was a blur. When I got back to the house, Daisy and Duke greeted me with their usual boundless enthusiasm, wagging tails and sloppy kisses. I knelt down, buried my face in Duke's fur, and just breathed. The anger, surprisingly, wasn't what hit me first. It was a profound, aching sadness. An emptiness. It wasn't just the act of cheating. It was the realization that everything, absolutely everything, for the past 2 months had been a lie. Every gentle touch, every casual smile, every "I love you" she'd whispered in my ear. They all felt tainted, hollowed out by this secret betrayal. My mind replayed moments, her calling my name, her laughing at my jokes, her holding my hand. Each memory, once cherished, now felt like a cruel mockery. How could I have been so blind? How could someone I loved so deeply, trusted so completely, orchestrate such a deceit? I spent the next few hours in a haze, mechanically going through the motions. I fed the dogs, tidied up the house, tried to pretend that the ground hadn't just opened up beneath my feet. But every surface, every object in our shared home felt foreign, coated in a film of falsehood. When she finally came home later that evening, her usual bright demeanor was back. "Hey honey," she chirped, dropping her keys on the counter. "Had a good day." My heart was pounding, a drum solo of dread and resolve. This was it, the confrontation. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. She tilted her head, a flicker of something, perhaps mild annoyance, crossing her face. "About what?" she asked, feigning innocence. "Mark," I said, just his name, and the mask slipped. Her eyes widened, a subtle tremor ran through her. "What about him?" she stammered, still trying to hold on to the lie. "I saw you," I stated, my voice still eerily calm. "I saw you kiss him." The denial came quickly, a flurry of accusations. "What are you talking about? Are you following me? That's crazy, Sarah." She tried to turn it around to make me the villain, but I didn't waver. I just stood there, my face a mask, my eyes unblinking. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I wouldn't give her the power of my pain. I knew instinctively that showing her how much she'd hurt me would only validate her actions, make her feel justified, or perhaps even worse, powerful. That was a satisfaction I would never ever grant her. We argued for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only 30 minutes. She twisted, she turned, she cried, she yelled. But I held my ground, a silent, unyielding wall. Finally, her defenses crumbled. The fight left her, replaced by a defeated sigh. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Okay, I did, I'm sorry." Sorry, the word hung in the air, hollow and meaningless. It didn't erase the images, the 2 months of lies, the shattered trust. But still I kept my face blank. No tears, no raised voice, no dramatic outburst. Just a quiet, chilling resolve that solidified in my chest. "I'm moving out," I said, the word surprising even myself. "For a week, I need to think." I packed a small bag, kissed Daisy and Duke goodbye, and drove to my sister's apartment. The week away was a blur of sleepless nights and endless contemplation. My sister, bless her heart, didn't pry, just offered comfort and silent support. But my mind was already racing, formulating a plan not for reconciliation but for something else entirely. Something cold, precise, and utterly final. She called, texted, pleaded. She missed me, she said. She made a mistake, she said. She loved me, she said. The words, once so potent, now felt like empty echoes. After a week, against every instinct screaming at me to never return, I went back. She greeted me with tearful hugs, promises of change, and declarations of renewed devotion. And I, with a straight face, a calm demeanor that hid a storm of calculated vengeance, told her I would forgive her. On one condition. I'll forgive you, I said, looking her dead in the eye, my voice steady. But I have to be able to sleep with someone else, and I won't tell you when or who. Her face drained of color. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for any sign of a lie, any crack in my resolve. She hated it. I could see it. The thought of me, her wife, with another person, the uncertainty of it was clearly agonizing to her. But she wanted me back. She wanted the life we had, or at least the illusion of it, too much. Reluctantly, with a shuddering breath, she finally agreed. Okay, she whispered, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and relief. Okay, I accept. She thought she had won. She thought I was truly forgiving her, that this condition was some twisted form of equality, a balm for my wounded pride. She was wrong, terribly, horribly wrong. That wasn't forgiveness. It was the first carefully placed domino in a game only I knew I was playing, and it was a game I intended to win completely and utterly. I had never, for a single moment, truly forgiven her. The plan had begun the second I saw her lips on his, 2 months before I even had the words for it. And for the next 2 years she would live with the consequences of that singular, devastating decision. While she anticipated my revenge in one form, I was busy orchestrating it in a way she could never have imagined. My little sister, a finance whiz, became my unwitting accomplice. We had work to do, so much work to do. The air in that lawyer's office felt thick enough to chew. It had been building, this tension, for months, years even. 2 years of holding my breath, of playing a part, of letting her believe she held a secret power over me. But in that moment when she accused me, when she tried to use my own carefully laid trap against me, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. My voice was steady even when I looked her dead in the eye and simply said, I never cheated. The words hung there, suspended. For a second she just stared, her mouth slightly agape like a fish out of water. Then a slow realization dawned in her eyes. It was like watching a movie in slow motion as her face shifted. First, confusion, then a flicker of disbelief, followed by something akin to fear. Finally, the full weight of it hit her, and the expression that settled on her features was a mirror image of my own when I saw her kissing him. That same gut-wrenching shock, the sudden void where trust used to be, the absolute cold horror of betrayal. It wasn't anger that filled her eyes, not yet. It was pure, unadulterated devastation. And in that moment, seeing it reflected back at me, I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just an emptiness where the pain used to be. It was finally gone. Her lawyer, a stout man with a perfectly manicured mustache, cleared his throat awkwardly. He clearly hadn't been privy to the intricate dance we'd been performing. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Davies, who had quickly understood the subtle layers of my plan, simply gave me a small, knowing nod. She hadn't needed to ask for details, she just knew. My ex-wife, let's call her Emily now because that's all she was to me, a ghost of a person from a life I was shedding, started to stammer. But you said, you promised. I cut her off, my voice still even. I said I would sleep with someone. I never said I would. I just said I wouldn't tell you when. You assumed. You lived in fear of something that never happened. That was your choice, your consequence for your actions. The color drained from her face completely. The truth, stark and undeniable, was laid bare. She had spent 2 years anticipating my supposed revenge, living with the ghost of her own deceit, only to realize that the real revenge was her own self-inflicted torment. She had been the architect of her own anxiety, the builder of her own prison. And I, Sarah Jenkins, was simply walking free from the wreckage she had created. The rest of the meeting was a blur of legal jargon. Papers were signed, agreements were finalized. Emily didn't say another word to me, not a single one. Her eyes, red-rimmed and distant, just stared blankly ahead. When it was all done, when Ms. Davies handed me a copy of the divorce decree, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for what felt like an eternity finally lifted. I walked out of that office into the bright Austin sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in years. The world didn't look different, but I did. I was finally truly free. The apartment my little sister Chloe and I moved into was a breath of fresh air. It wasn't huge, but it was ours. 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room, and a kitchen that smelled of coffee and laughter instead of stale secrets and unspoken lies. Chloe, bless her heart, had been my rock throughout everything. She didn't pry, didn't judge. She just listened, offered a shoulder, and helped me pack boxes when I finally left what had once been our marital home. She was there when I felt like I was drowning, and she celebrated with me when I transferred the last of my assets, ensuring my financial independence. Living with Chloe was a joy I hadn't realized I was missing. We'd always been close, but the years of my marriage had created a quiet distance. Now we reconnected over late-night talks, binge-watching bad reality TV, and exploring all the quirky coffee shops and food trucks Austin had to offer. She cooked terrible but enthusiastic meals, and I surprisingly found myself enjoying them. The simple act of sharing a space with someone who genuinely cared, with no hidden agendas or deceit, was profoundly healing. I spent the first few weeks just being. I woke up when I wanted, drank my coffee slowly on our small balcony, and let the sounds of the city fill the silence that had once been so oppressive in my old house. I started taking long walks along Lady Bird Lake, watching the paddleboarders and enjoying the warm Texas breeze. I went to yoga classes, tried new recipes, and even started painting again, a hobby I'd abandoned years ago. Each brushstroke, each quiet moment of contemplation felt like a small step forward away from the darkness. There were still moments, of course, when the old wounds would ache. A sudden memory, a familiar song, a certain smell, they could bring a wave of sadness. But those waves were smaller now, less powerful. They washed over me, but they didn't drag me under. I learned to acknowledge them, to feel the pain for a moment and then to let it go. It was part of the healing, I realized, not a setback. I thought about Emily sometimes, about what her life must be like now. I imagined her grappling with the realization that she had been living a lie, not just to me, but to herself. I wondered if she truly understood the depth of what she had done, not just the act of cheating, but the insidious way she had eroded trust, the casual disregard for another person's heart. But those thoughts no longer consumed me. They were fleeting, distant echoes, like a faint melody from a radio station I no longer tuned into. The fear, the anxiety, the suffocating anticipation of waiting for my revenge to happen, that was her burden now. And for me, that nightmare was finally over. The past 2 years had been a dark tunnel, but I had walked through it, not just survived, but emerged stronger, wiser, and unequivocally happier. I was Sarah Jenkins, 28, in Austin, Texas, and my future, for the first time in a long time, felt bright and full of possibility. I was ready to build a new life, one built on honesty, self-respect, and genuine joy. And that, I realized, was the most poetic revenge of all. It wasn't about hurting her, it was about healing myself. And I was finally, gloriously healed. The air in the lawyer's office felt thick with unspoken words, but for me it was lighter than it had been in years. Seeing her face, that mirror image of my own agony from so long ago, was not a moment of cruelty, but one of pure, unadulterated release. It wasn't about making her hurt as much as I did. It was about ensuring she understood the depth of her deceit, and that I was no longer bound by it. The contract was null and void, not just on paper, but in my soul. Walking out of that building, the Austin sun felt different on my skin. It wasn't the relentless heat that had simmered with my anger and pain for 2 long years, but a warm, cleansing embrace. I took a deep, shuddering breath, filling my lungs with the promise of a future I had meticulously, patiently built for myself. Now I'm Sarah Jenkins, 28 years old and finally free. My little sister and I found a small apartment near Zilker Park, a place where the laughter of children and the buzz of live music drift in on the breeze. There are no more furtive glances, no more calculated moves, no more living a double life. My days are filled with honest work, genuine smiles, and the simple joy of sharing a meal with my sister, whose unwavering support was a silent anchor through the storm. The nightmare is truly over. The waiting game, the constant performance, the gnawing anticipation of her reaction to truth I never intended to deliver until the very end, it's all gone. What remains is a quiet, profound peace. It's not a vengeful triumph, but the serene satisfaction of reclaiming myself piece by painful piece and emerging whole. I built my own escape, brick by careful brick, and stepped into the light. This is my new normal, and it is everything I fought for.